Good morning, everyone. I'm Carol Rockhill. I'm one of the planners of the Grand Rounds series, along with Michelle Kuhn, and newly, Doug Russell has joined our team. And I do want to thank Channing Daniel, who is around here somewhere, and who has been our administrative partner in getting ready for a new season of Grand Rounds. So today's our first presentation. Thank you to the people here in the room who have come through the rain on this fall day. And happy that we have, although a soggy day today, a sunny weekend forecast. This happens to be a pretty big week for us here at Seattle Children's in Psychiatry because we had the soft launch of an urgent care that opened this week, as well as moving our partial hospitalization program to our outpatient Magnuson site, and both of those were successful, so we're feeling great at the end of this week. I do want to call attention to a couple things. One, there are Grand Rounds schedules in paper, and they should have also been attached to the announcement for today's Grand Rounds, and that next time for the November Grand Rounds, it will be virtual only. And also that there is a reception in Ocean 7 in the cafeteria area after. So all of you who are here in person and all those of you who are virtual but nearby, please come and join us. In addition, there'll be a short faculty meeting for 30 minutes for people who are involved in faculty here in this room and online. A land acknowledgement, acknowledging that we're on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and we do honor with gratitude the land and the Duwamish tribe, and acknowledge that this acknowledgement doesn't take the place of authentic relationships with Indigenous communities, but serves as one way to honor the land we're on and resist cultural erasure. And we acknowledge that this country exists and prospers as a result of free enslaved labor of Black people. And we honor the legacy of the African diaspora and Black life, knowledge, and skills that have been stolen due to violence and systemic oppression. And each month we reaffirm that we're committed to being aware of our own privilege and about how oppression plays a role in the lives of patients, families, and employees that we serve. We strive to be anti-racist and to improve care for those who have less privilege than ourselves. We also are celebrating the month of October being National Depression, Education, and Awareness Month. And I am going to introduce Dr. Alyssa Hemke, who is a child and adolescent psychiatry faculty member here, and among other roles is the medical director of our early childhood clinic, serving kids under 5, who will be able to introduce our wonderful Grand Round speaker for October.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm so honored today to get to introduce Dr. Oxford. Dr. Oxford, as you know, is the Catherine Barnard Endowed Professor for Infant Mental Health, the Vice Chair of Research in Child, Family, and Population Health Nursing at UW, and the Executive Director of the Barnard Center for Infant Mental Health and Development. She's the PI on multiple NIH grants focused on promoting first relationships, and also has worked on many studies disseminating promoting first relationships and other infant mental health interventions to primary care and other diverse settings. She trains extensively on promoting first relationships, child-parent psychotherapy, and has authored over 50 peer-reviewed papers. I will say on a personal note, although clearly an exceptionally busy and accomplished person, Dr. Oxford has been so generous and available to me and others in our division. She has done specific trainings for our fellows and has also welcomed our fellows into formal promoting first relationships training cohorts. I remember the first time that I got to hear Dr. Oxford teach at an infant mental health training when I was about 8 months pregnant. And she, I'm sure today, will talk about scaffolding and co-regulation. And I will say that for me, it was such a regulating and organizing experience as I looked ahead to the daunting task of having a newborn. Most recently, I feel so fortunate to be collaborating with Dr. Oxford and several other child psychiatrists on an upcoming presentation at ACAP. And I will say, true to her reflective function teaching, she has been a consummate mentor and so wise and helpful in guiding and directing us where we need it, and also letting our otherwise very junior crew find our way. So I am so excited for our division to get to learn from her today and think about the many applications of infant mental health and promoting first relationships for the work that we do. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Monica. I'm so glad you guys are here, and hello to folks online. I'm going to talk about infant and early childhood mental health and our intervention promoting first relationships that's come out of the Barnard Center and faculty who've been working on infant and early childhood mental health for decades now. This is somewhat of a topic that's been around since the 1950s and 60s, but really has taken hold in service and how we interact with families as a training or a service delivery program in the last 20, 30 years, especially the last 20 years, I would say, across the US and other countries. Disclosures, I am the director of the Barnard Center and Parent-Child Relationships programs, and so we do disseminate training for PFR. I'm going to first just define infant mental health so we're all on the same page. Infant mental health is the developing capacity from birth to 5, or some people say birth to 3, to experience, regulate, and express emotions. So think of that critical early understanding of who am I as an emotional person, as an emotional being. To form close relationships, so how do I interact with others in my world, because we are social beings, and to explore the environment and learn. So being able to kind of manage my emotions, form close relationships, allows me then to develop the competence and confidence to go out and learn what I need to do. Learn as a toddler how to start sharing, or learn as a preschooler how to be excited on the playground, but then kind of focus a little bit more in the classroom. As a kindergartner, how to learn to make friends and put yourself out there and experience these new scary environments that are sometimes overwhelming and big. All of that begins with the scaffolding, essentially, that the parent and caregiver provide. So infant mental health is really not about the infant, it's about the relationship. So it's about the dyad. And it's nested. It's nested within cultures, it's nested within families and communities. And so that aspect of developing mental health is really sort of generative in those contexts. And so we recognize that. Because we're talking about relational health, I really want to set the stage and talk about safety. And I want you to think about and keep safety in your brain throughout this whole talk. Being able, I love this quote from Van der Kolk in The Body Keeps Score, being able to feel safe with other people is probably the single most important aspect of mental health. Safe connections are fundamental to meaningful and satisfying lives. And so we're going to look at the generation of a sense of safety. How do children learn to explore their environment in a safe way, and how do caregivers enhance that sense of safety and security, which is essentially attachment theory. So as I said, mental health is relational health. Children are hardwired to send social signals. We're social beings. So we call that a serve, and we're going to kind of dive into this a little bit. So a serve, maybe the baby cries or maybe the baby reaches. Those are communications about the internal state and need that the child has. And caregivers are biologically primed to respond to that cue. So to pick up a crying baby, to provide comfort, to smile at a baby that's smiling at us, all of that kind of serve and return. These are moments, microanalytic moments throughout the day that inform the child about themselves. Who am I? Am I lovable? Am I accepted? Are my emotions okay? Am I okay? So this is happening every day, every moment throughout the day, because infants are 100% on their adults to give them comfort when they're distressed, and then also provide opportunities for joy and exploration. In the literature, we would think of this as contingency, attunement, or synchrony. So if you wanted to do a lit search, you probably are not going to find serve and return, but you'll find those other terms. But we know that caregivers don't always have the capacity to respond sensitively. And we do not have to be perfect. Ed Tronick did a lot of research in this sort of microanalytic back and forth serve and return. We don't have to be perfect. And so don't let don't think that we have to be perfect. Actually, relationships are messy. And the repair of something that went awry is actually a really important learning for the child. So caregivers do not have to be perfect. But when, more often than not, that caregiver is unable to respond sensitively because of their own trauma, their own mental health challenges, their own issues, if that becomes the tone of the relationship, the child has to change how they communicate. So if the tone is more often than not harsh or rejecting of the child's especially distress, their distress that's a really important piece where we do want to respond, or absent, maybe the parent has is kind of checked out and not able to respond, or inconsistent. So if more often than not the child is not getting those needs met, they change the way they communicate. And this is happening in the first year of life, and this is attachment theory. This is it. It's a circle of communication. So children adapt, right? So if every time I cry as an infant, my caregiver becomes angry and rejecting, I am going to learn to inhibit that cry because it doesn't bring comfort. Crying is designed to bring safety, comfort, and protection. But if it's not bringing that, the child, through repeated experiments of crying and actually feeling worse, the baby learns to inhibit. If the baby cries and there's not a consistent response or a response at all, the baby has to amplify that message, amplify that distress, that negative affect. I'm here, come to me. I need you. So that adaptation is an amplification to elicit caregiving. And that's really the crux of attachment theory. I'm going to go a little bit deeper in a moment. But so we see this is a communication, right? Who wants to say what they see? What's this baby saying? Does anybody want to holler out? What is this baby saying? Help me. Yeah, I'm uncomfortable. I'm stressed. I don't know what's happening. This is a new experience. The baby's being lowered in the bathtub. So we can look at the baby and know that this is a communication. We can look at the eyes, the forehead, the fist. So this is the first form of communication, is mostly the sort of nonverbal. Babies do a lot of communicating. They are regulating us through their nonverbals. So if we're getting too intense, they're going to turn away. And hopefully we can detect that and okay, I'll chill out. I'll take a break. And when they're smiling and reaching toward us and we see that, we respond to that. So this is a communication of an internal state. And if we don't detect it, the child will amplify that message and potentially start crying. We don't know what happened, right? We don't know what the caregiver did, and that's culturally determined. But what we know is, did it work? What do you guys think? Do you see, is the child's state different? Is it better? Yeah. So the hand is open, the eyes are relaxed, the forehead is relaxed. So now the child had that stressor, and we are built to have stress. So we have a stress, we become real alert, we're paying attention to our environment, and then we recover. And this happens throughout the day. And that's okay. It's okay to have these sort of experiences and then recover. The important part is that recovery is facilitated by the caregiver and hopefully not aggravated by the caregiver, so that there's no recovery. And that's where kind of complex trauma, relational trauma comes in. So we're going to see this process of serve and return happen. This is a video of an aunt who is greeting a 4.5-month-old Sarah, her niece, and her greeting is a little startling, and so Sarah's going to get activated, and you're going to see how her parents respond to that. She's crying. Yeah. And so the aunt is providing comfort. And you can hear mom say, I think it's ready, the baby is ready for dad to take the baby from the aunt. And the aunt's like, oh no, it's okay. So dad takes the baby. So she had a stressor, and now she's regulated. She's safe in the arms of her dad. She has a trusting relationship with her dad. And he says, as long as it's a safe distance. And we see her smiling. Now remember that part of the infant mental health definition, exploration? She's exploring this new person. She is moving to the next level of, she got regulated, and now she can explore. And now Aunt is going to hold her again. Like, okay, we recovered, we repaired.
Sarah's decided you're all right.
And you can see in her body, she's not quite relaxed.
She doesn't even let us sneak in kisses like that.
She's going to look to her caregivers to get that sort of connection and support, sense of safety.
Is that okay, Miss Sarah? Uh-oh. Don't make little crying noises, Sarah.
Out of range of the camera.
No, you're never out of range of the camera.
Hey, moving.
So she's tolerating it, right? She's tolerating this.
You're not supposed to be doing this. We're supposed to know each other now. Here.
And that face-to-face was just too stimulating. And so she started to cry again. So she tolerated it, and then it just got to be too much. So again, that stress response got activated. She recovered in her dad's arms and then tried it again. And our job as caregivers is not to dysregulate our children. It's to help them recover after a dysregulating experience. So what we did is we just saw the definition of mental health. We just saw the serve and return. So the attachment behaviors, crying, cling posture, tension. She's communicating that she needs help. She's seeking her caregiver, getting support when she's in her dad's arms, and then exploring briefly. And then we saw the caregiving behaviors, recognizing the cue, providing safety and comfort, co-regulating so she can recover and move on, and then providing an opportunity to safely explore. So now I'm going to go into attachment theory a little more in depth and sort of thinking, because I know many of you are working with older children or adolescents or adults. And so how does this play out past infancy, right? So in this diagram, I have this sort of bar at the top that says safety and danger on the ends. The more and my research is in child welfare and maltreated samples. So the more danger a child is exposed to, the more they need to adapt to the caregiving environment within which they are trying to grow and learn, right? So this green represents security. It's comfortable. It's what Sarah has. I can be upset, and that's okay. My caregiver has pretty much the capacity most of the times to help me through this. The yellow represents sort of insecurity, but more of an emotional, like family tone of insecurity, not danger of real threat. So whether that's physical maltreatment or the threat of abandonment. So the threat of emotionally withdrawing from a child is akin to a huge threat. So yellow kind of represents insecurity. Many of us in this room probably have, moderate or little elements of insecurity based on our early experiences, and we've overcome them. They haven't been so challenging that we haven't been able to overcome them. And then the red represents those kiddos who were endangered, and their attachment strategy is so critical to their survival. It draws clinical attention. So the attachment strategies are A, B, and C. A is avoidant, B is secure, C is preoccupied. You've probably heard those labels before. They really run along a dimension. So on the A side, that's the child who, like I said in that serve and return image, that's the child who has learned to dampen the cue of distress. I'm not gonna cry because it overwhelms my caregiver. I will suppress that. And instead, I might feel icky inside, but I'm going to learn over time as I gain more control over my body and emotions to inhibit that cry and maybe later on in preschool produce a smile. Even though inside I don't feel good, I'm going to not let people know that because that's not safe. Now, again, that's in that sort of yellow. So it's sort of socially inhibited, I would say. But the child's emotions are overregulated. In the B, secure, the child can display negative emotions without punishment and get support more often than not. They're learning about themselves as emotional beings. They have more flexibility in emotional expressions. Underregulated is that kiddo whose caregiver is either inconsistent or not checking in, and they need to amplify that distress cue to draw caregiving, to elicit caregiving, to later on, for the clinically identified children, demand engagement from the caregiver. Another dimension in infancy when we're coding this is proximity seeking. So interestingly, in the first years of attachment theory, before the label avoidant, secure, and preoccupied, Mary Ainsworth had done a bunch of videotapes, stressed out infants at age 12 months and had 3 piles of her coding sheets. And she calls John Bowlby and she says, I've got this pile. They don't cry. The parent leaves the room, which is one of the stressors, and a stranger comes in. They just play with their toys. They seem unaffected. The parent comes in, they continue to play. So they originally thought, wow, these are really autonomous, healthy. These kids are going to look great because they're so independent for a 12-month-old. And the B kids, they would cry when mom left, right? I'm allowed to cry and display my negative emotion and then, kind of get regulated. Mom comes back, cry, get that connection, make that repair, and then move on to explore. And that proximity. So it's coming in, getting support, and going back out. So it's more of a loop. The C strategy, the preoccupied, are kids where they would really amplify distress. Parent would go out, they would follow, pull on the door, scream and cry, and often we'd have to send the parent back in. When the parent comes back in, the child is clinging to the caregiver. And the function is, if I let you out of my sight, I may not get you back. I'm terrified that I'm not going to get you back. So I'm not going to let you out of my sight. And you can see how that's a reinforcing dynamic that's very hard for parents to uncouple in preschool and school age and adolescence. And it changes how it looks. Okay, so that's proximity. And then there's perspective. And this is really as the child gets older, and then we're thinking about adults. So perspective. The individual who's developed an avoidance strategy is really taking very good at knowing what everybody else is wanting or thinking, because what's dangerous to them is not doing what's right and drawing your anger. So think about this with adolescents or adult patients. And actually, I don't really think that this is a big, that these folks are headed into therapy a lot unless there's something demanding them to change, because it's very comfortable to be safe in your own little bubble. So I don't know that this really takes up a big part of they don't attract clinical attention in preschool and school age, because these are the good kids. They're behaving, they are doing everything right. So they're not going to really attract that attention, but they are really good at others' perspective, and it's very hard for them to take their perspective. So you might have a parent, a caregiver, or teenager who is really focused on pleasing everybody else. The self-focus, the C strategy, is the one that's going to draw attention because they're acting out behavior, the conflictual behavior, what the clinging in infancy turns into is really a coercive dynamic, where if the parent isn't engaged and constantly engaged, then the child will act out. And there's no way to resolve the problem. So parents will say, no matter what I do, it doesn't work. they feel controlled and manipulated by the, let's say, school-age child or adolescent at this point. The child's mood dominates the household. These are the kinds of things a parent might say. They don't know how they got here, and they don't know that this is sort of that early infancy sort of map of how to keep them, the caregiver, engaged. And so it's very hard, but the presentation for the child who's developed a preoccupied strategy is very self-focused. So how this looks, you know, in the yellow, we have avoidant, dismissing, or preoccupied, a little ambivalent, a little hot, right? A little spicy in the relationship. We're not really worried about those in the yellow. They're not gonna necessarily be the ones who need a lot of clinical intervention. They might go to counseling. Many of us in this room might have, you know, this sort of mild form of attachment insecurity. We can kind of go, oh God, I don't know why I always do that, and try to figure it out. And then new relationships, you kind of repair and get to that point where you're comfortable. We call that an earned B. But as kids grow and as danger persists, the strategy can become more intense. The strategy can become more fixed. So by preschool age, you can see compulsive compliance and performance. Compulsive compliance looks like this. I've never seen this. This is the most extreme I've ever seen. So compulsive compliant on the very extreme looks like this. I have to caveat that. On the very extreme, it looks like there was a child, we use videotape feedback, who was standing next to the mother who was sitting, the 4-year-old child. There was a 2-year-old playing on the floor with his back to the situation, quietly, avoiding, quietly playing, not demanding any attention. And there was a therapist, and the parent was telling the therapist that this little girl has no personality. She's nothing. The mom was so angry at how vacant this little girl was. And to prove it, she said to the therapist, well, watch. Sit down. And the little girl sits down. Raise your arm. The little girl raises her arm. Frozen in compliance. Really endangered children often present, now that was like robotic, we would all pick that up, but present with smiles and cheerfulness and everything is okay, because the danger is so pervasive. So it's not that sort of like I'm mildly inhibited, I'm a little uncomfortable in relationships. It's dangerous to do anything outside of what my caregiver wants. Compulsive performance. I don't know if any of you guys have read Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mother Died. Okay, I see a couple nods. Compulsive performance. So she's an actress, she entered a career at a child, age 4 or 5, I think it was 5. She didn't want to do it, but she did it to please her mother. She had this huge career. She talks about how she loathed acting. She was always uncomfortable, but she suppressed her needs and herself, her sense of self and her discomfort to perform for her mother, and her mother was kind of living through her because her mother really wanted that life. And then there's role reversal. So you might see that where parentification, where the child is really either taking care of the adult emotionally or physically. And then in later adolescent, you can also see this in hyper self-reliance. On the preoccupied end, in not the yellow, but in the more dangerous end of things, you see a lot of DV couples where one is using an A strategy and one is a C strategy. That C strategy is preoccupied or obsessed with their attachment figure. In adults, it's usually your romantic partner. So that obsession that I need you, I'm not whole without you, enmeshment, it's just very hard to meet that person's needs. The demands are never, never, never enough. It's this really intense, volatile, kind of enmeshed cycle in relationships. So you do see that in the more danger zone in DV relationships. In high school and school age, this is, like I said, a parent who says, nothing we do is right, nothing and they just literally feel like giving up because nothing works. And they are really, it's difficult to understand. It's very complex, difficult to understand. Okay, so we recognize these. I see, people are nodding like, yeah, I recognize that archetype, right? So these are self-protective strategies. This is a cartoon. I don't know the name of the cartoon. I think it's like an older cartoon. But this is really what it is, right? This is in our culture. We understand this. The child who's inhibiting, I'm not going to ask for help. The child who can express the need for help, you can see it on his face. And then the child who's demanding to elicit caregiving. Okay, so just caveats here. It's not fixed, it's repairable. In infancy, in our interventions, we can move people to security. So it's malleable. And it's different. You can have a secure relationship with your mom and an insecure relationship with your dad, or a secure relationship with your grandpa and anxiety with both of your parents. So it's relationship specific. And as I said, greater danger, the greater reliance on the strategy is to stay safe. So what happens is when we're now children, adolescents, adults, we have this map of relationships, and it's our implicit memory, it's procedural memory, it's the procedure of what I do when I'm distressed. It's a procedure. And so as a baby, I learned what I do when I'm distressed is distress just means my attachment system has been activated. So I'm hoping no one's attachment system has been activated. You're all really relaxed, right? So when there's a threat, the threat could be to your sense of self. It could be something embarrassing. It could be a physical threat. It could be real danger. It could be a natural disaster. It could be your boss chewing you out. The threat could be anything, right? It activates your attachment system. Sorry about that. It activates your attachment system, and your implicit memory will lock into your strategy. Now, again, if we're in the kind of yellow zone and we're adults, we've kind of figured this out, like, oh, I just want to disappear right now. I hate this. I want to get away from this, or, oh my gosh, I can't believe, But we learn to put guardrails on those reactions. Again, the ones who are drawing clinical attention are more on the outskirts there. So it's our way of being, it's our go-to when our attachment system has been activated. And so understanding that is really how you kind of progress and grow and learn to navigate this sort of procedure that you have. Now, here's a little girl in daycare. She has a procedure. Her procedure is, I reach my arms up, I get my needs met. She has a procedure that looks like very secure attachment. So she's in daycare. Her provider, her main teacher, has described her as sneaky and has said, I just don't really like her. I don't know why. I'm just not connecting to her. And we do not shame people for their negative feelings about children. That's actually where we work. That's where we have to stay. It's that feeling that is really getting in the way of her being responsive to this child. So no shame, right? And she's a very sensitive caregiver, and she's admitting, I'm not connecting to this little girl. This is PFR. We bring the video back the next week and we play it, and she went, oh my God, I had no idea. I had no idea. That's all it took. She completely changed. She's like, she wanted a connection with me. I love to connect to my kids. So it was just opening up her ability to see the child in front of her and kind of bypass whatever implicit something that was getting in the way. Okay, so that's why we use video, because talking through it is great, but seeing it is golden. Okay, so there's lots of reasons why there's a misfit or why caregivers might not be responding to kids. Lack of understanding, social emotional development, so psychosocial education. You kind of get in there and kind of straighten things out, and you're good to go. Stress in the environment. So if the parent maybe lost their job or has DV, it's going to be harder for the caregiver to connect. Mental health is a big one. Having a caregiver with mental health issues that are not being treated or resolved, really they just have a more difficult time connecting to and responding to the child's needs. Parents' unresolved loss and trauma. A poor fit between parent capacity and child temperament or child needs. So kiddos with chronic medical issues or temperamentally sensitive, that's at risk, and them getting that support is going to be really critical. A poor fit between societal expectations, right? Some kiddos, just their temperament, their need, they need more stimulation, they need to be out on the playground. In society, we just don't really allow for that kind of opportunity. Moving into PFR, discussion of our research, we're really about supporting that serve and return, that connection. We have a home visiting model, we have a child care intervention, which is 8 weekly sessions. We have group interventions, which is 8 to 10 weekly sessions. We're in a lot of SUD, substance use disorder treatment centers right now, helping parents who are in recovery reconnect with their kiddos. We are in primary care. And here at Seattle Children's, you guys have training. I'm little shout out to the Seattle Children's, Dr. Abigail Grant and Jeannie Larson, who co-authored our pediatric training. They do a training for the residents and continuity clinic faculty. I know I'm probably butchering that. And Molly was very much a part of this, like seven years ago we started this. It was awesome. So it is available. We're also, if children are in the child welfare system, they can get referred to PFR free by their social worker. And we're training early support infant and toddler care providers, so speech and language, OTPT, who are doing the birth to 3 interventions. We are on all the major evidence-based lists. This is just to say we have been vetted like nobody's been vetted. They look through our publications. They ask us for data. They really, really put us through the ringer. But I'm glad they do, right? They're very rigorous. So we're on 2 federal lists. We get funding from maternal infant. We can be funded from MCV, maternal infant home visiting program. I don't know, I'm not doing that right. We're also in the Family First Prevention Service Act. So that's the Child Welfare Act that was passed now, I think like 5 years ago. Washington State hasn't really leveraged that funding yet, even though we are in child welfare, but once they get that funding, there'll be even more opportunities for PFR there, but we are already in child welfare. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of get through this. 10 weekly 1-hour sessions. It's based on attachment theory. The client is the relationship, and we're really trying to increase the parent's capacity to reflect and think about and pause and understand their child. So we're focused in on that serve and return piece. Our 4 main strategies are joining. So we really do spend a lot of time connecting with the caregiver, figuring out what their needs are, how they're feeling, because we are not going to support the relationship if the parent doesn't feel supported. So we spend joining as an authentic part of our strategy. We use video-based feedback to increase reflection and observation. So we'll videotape 1 week, we'll bring it back the next week, we'll play it, and then we're gonna pause it. And when the puppet goes in the face and the baby turns their head and arches their back, we'll pause it and say, I wonder what's going on for him or her. We're not saying this is what's happening. We want the parent to figure that out and tell us. Their reflective capacity is what's important, not ours. So we're going to use the videotape to provide a venue to reflect. Then we also want to increase confidence and competence, because if you don't feel good about yourself or you don't feel capable, you're not really going to, suffer through the hard work. So we provide positive feedback, and every tape has positive feedback. Even some really hard tapes to watch, you can find positive things. So when we watched that Australian mom, I mentioned a few positive things that she was doing. So she was using her words, she was describing the toy. So we can pull that out, because all parents have strengths, and we have to start where they are, just like parents have to start where the kiddo is. And kids, we need to recognize their strengths too. And then we build knowledge with our handouts. So we go into very deep baby cues. We help the parent. We spend a whole session on kind of understanding nonverbal behavior. This is the intervention that was in Australia. It's a video and some cards, and it's kind of a discussion around that. And then like, well, what kind of cues does your baby show? We, the kind of structure of it, we talk about attachment, but we really talk about social emotional needs, which is this list of needs over here. So we're always bringing it back to that. And all of our samples, low education, almost all of our samples, low education, very low income, so poverty, a lot of folks with mental health issues, a lot of just struggling, stressed parents. So it's really concrete and tangible, right? So when the baby's doing that with the puppet in the face, the parent sees, oh my God, I didn't realize that when they watch the video back. Then they're starting to observe their baby more for those cues. Then we say, well, what do you think he's needing? Well, obviously he needs to feel like that, the puppet's not going to eat him. He's afraid of the puppet, so he needs to feel safe. So we practice and do this sort of concrete, behavior needs. Oh, what do you think he's needing? Oh my gosh, he needs some predictability. I changed the task too fast or whatever. So it's very concrete in that sense, which I think is why it's been really effective, and the video. So we look at the parent may bring up a behavior like, temper tantrums or whatever. We talk about behavior has meaning. It's nested in that social emotional needs. And what we have to do to change the behavior isn't focus on the behavior, but the need. And so this is a 1.5 minute video of a mom who was reunified with her birth child, and she was just having a hard time with him, and she's reflecting on the changes she's seen since she had PFR.
And we talked a little bit about kind of what you're working on with him now, and how he's been doing pretty well with some of those things he was struggling with.
Yeah, he's been doing amazing.
What do you think has been kind of helped him with that? I know you've kind of worked on being consistent with responding to some of those things.
I think something that I didn't notice before, or I think I did notice it, I just wasn't doing anything about it, was giving him the attention that he needed.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways, some of his acting out was him trying to get my attention, or him showing me that he was frustrated. So it's been really nice, actually, because the time that we have together now, there's nothing else involved. There's no phone, there's no outside sources. There's
distraction.
Yeah, there's nothing else. It's just me and him. And I've really seen a change in his behaviors, and because I before, remember how I told you he would sit at my feet and he would cry and he'd want me to pick him up, and then I would pick him up and he would hit and scratch and pull hair, and I was so frustrated because it's like, well, do you want me to pick you up or not?
Right.
And we don't have that problem at all anymore. And I think a lot of it has to do with he was frustrated with me because he wasn't getting all of the attention that he needed.
Yeah.
And I love that she's describing that sort of ambivalence of the child. I want to be picked up. Oh no, I don't. I'm really angry. She uncoupled from that dynamic, and she did it. We don't tell parents, you should play with your child, 15 minutes a day without your cell phone. But we help them discover through this reflective process what will work. And so she said it in her video. I think he wasn't getting the attention from me. And so she designed her own intervention, which was, now I play with him and I just pay attention to him. There's no distractions. So she's driving the solution, which is, that solution's going to stick. So feeling acknowledged and understood, she's meeting all these needs now. The behavior is no longer an issue. Having a mutually enjoyable relationship. So this very concrete list is really powerful. And when we can make that bridge for parents and like flex that muscle of like behavior, oh, there's a need, then we can really apply it to multiple issues, right? Multiple domains, multiple ages. It sticks with you because it becomes a way of being a parent that is reflective. And in the literature, parents who have the capacity to reflect and mentalize, oh, my child is feeling this, even though I'm feeling this, and separate the two, that's what leads to security. So it is kind of based in the literature on attachment, which I really couldn't go into. This is a reunified birth parent, one of my studies. I get it now. I get him. I want to think about him a different way. It helped me step back, take a breath, evaluate the situation. That's literally what we do. We practice that. Put pause. I wonder. Is he scared? Why is he acting this way? Is he stressed? Does he need me? It makes it a little more comforting in the situation, and for him, he's more happy and secure knowing his mom gets what I'm saying or why I'm acting this way. I get him now. And that's all we want. We want parents to have a deeper understanding and connection. Safety is critical to this. For parents to reflect, for us as providers to reflect on the dyads that we're working with, or supervisors to reflect on those who you're supervising, we need to enhance a sense of emotional safety, because really people aren't physically unsafe in clinical supervision or whatever, but emotional safety so that we could do the hard work of reflecting. And like that daycare provider, she was like, I don't know why, I'm just not connected. So for her to feel comfortable exploring this with a provider, she needs to know that the provider's not judging her or shaming her or going to, punish her in some way. So we have 8 randomized clinical trials. 2 of them are in the field. We have the first 3 are 3 trials in child welfare, all in Washington State. We have a 4th we just started. We're testing PFR by telehealth. This is the 10-week home visiting model. We have 2 trials that were in tribal communities, rural tribal communities, and PFR was delivered by members of the community. We have 1 in Spanish-speaking and English-speaking, moms with newborns, but the moms had a mental health services diagnosis during pregnancy. So this was really to kind of address that mental health piece. And then we have 1 now in North Carolina. It's in a pediatric clinic, but there's a provider in a pediatric clinic role. I'm blanking, but that provider is doing home visiting. So we just are starting that. It just got funded. We're not even in the field yet. That one is interesting because we're looking at telomere and epigenetic changes and erosion. And we do have physiology studies that show we're protecting children's stress response systems. So we believe that we will be also buffering cellular aging. So that's what that study is about. In all of our studies, all of them, we changed that observation measure of parent sensitive responsive care. And all of them, we changed parent knowledge of social emotional development. We do change externalizing behavior. You can see the Cohen's D. Not all of those were statistically significant, but they were in the right direction. But from 0.12, which is not significant, to 1.18, a whole standard deviation and a fifth. Child emotional development, stress physiology, sleep. We prevent foster care placement by the Cohen's D is 0.5, but we reduce it by a 2.5 reduction in placement into foster care, and improve foster care stability if we provide it to the foster or kin caregiver, so that the behavior problems that the child has, the caregiver can go, oh, okay, I get it. He needs to feel safe and secure, or she needs to feel safe and secure. I'm gonna rush through this, but we do moderator tests, right? Do we do better with people with a lot of stress or not? Is this more for the general pop or specified targeted? Well, all these are targeted, but we improve sensitivity and child behavior, stronger effects in the reunified birth sample, stronger effects for parents who report being physically maltreated when they were children, stronger effects for the women with the 8-week-olds stronger effects on sensitivity if they had really high, like standard deviation plus high, depression, anxiety, PTSD symptoms. And then for children, we buffer children from developing externalizing behavior in the child welfare system if their caregiver had PFR. Okay, that was a mouthful. I have a whole, it's pretty, so it's not hard to read, document that summarizes all of our studies, has the publications, and I'm happy to send that to anybody. Stress physiology. So we improved morning and cortisol and stimulated cortisol, returned it to more typical presentation compared to the control group in foster care, which the foster children are more blunted in their cortisol. They're stimulated in morning cortisol. We, in our CPS sample, we put little toddlers through a stressful series of tasks, and the kids whose parents had PFR were more regulated and able to do those tasks relative to the control group. Publications are cited. The next one's not my study, and I'm not going to do it justice, but it's pretty darn cool. It's younger siblings of an older sibling who has autism spectrum disorder, so these are kids at risk. And they found that the kids in the intervention group had a more typical profile of social attention versus object attention using electrophysiological habitation. I'm not even going to try. So the control group had more object attention than social attention, and the social attention of the intervention group looked more similar to typically developing children. And that's it. And if there are any questions, one more quote. I love the parent voice in all of this. The PFR program helped me understand my child's emotions and needs. The videos helped me step outside of the moment and gives me a chance to see room for improvement. So it's really just providing a venue for parents to explore their own parenting. And this is my email and our 2 websites. And feel free to email me. And I think we have a few minutes for questions or comments.
Exactly. And I have a microphone for people in the room, but also I think there's a question on the chat. Do you want to represent that?
Thank you so much. That was so impressive. I'm over here having all kinds of childhood emotions and getting some healing. But there's a question in the chat. Dr. Manjarrez asks, has there been any research on teaching these skills to parents of children with autism, either following diagnosis or when there is an infant sibling, and these skills could scaffold in an almost preventative way?
Yes, so this one study was done here at UW, and the authors, Jones, Dawson, Kelly, Estetz, Annette, I don't know how to say her last name, and Webb. And so that's the only study, and those were younger siblings of children with autism. And absolutely, I think, there's this evidence, but absolutely, I think for all populations, kids, not all children communicate in really easy ways, right? So using video to understand what your unique child with your unique child's communication strategies helps support the parent to meet those needs. And then kind of figuring out, this is a difficult thing for my child to navigate. So I can see that now with these subtle cues of disengagement that maybe I didn't notice before. So yes, there's one publication, and I think there's more room for research and expanding that literature base.
Thank you, Dr. Oxford, for an elegant summary of the rationale and evidence for PFR.
Yeah.
I'm interested in your effort to target substance-exposed dyads.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how you've modulated your intervention for that population in that setting.
Okay, so in the reunified birth sample, the CPS sample, high uses of substances, they get the same intervention and they get the same strategy. We're also nested in PCAP, so Parent-Child Assistant Program, which has sort of that case management intervention for substance-involved mothers with children birth to 3. So we don't change the intervention. In our reflections, substances might come up, or the impact of substances on the child. We are doing a grant called FOR right now that is more about a service, and we're delivering it, like I said, I mentioned, in SUD sort of centers. They are using it as a group, as part of their group facilitation. But we haven't really changed it. The only change, well, we adapted PFR to the tribal communities, and we have a paper publishing that. We adapted PFR to the reunified birth samples by adding 2 sessions where the child wasn't present, so that we can talk and allow space for the parent to kind of talk about the separation, because there's usually a lot of guilt and shame and really big feelings around that we would not want in front of the child. So there's 2 sessions, so that's actually a 12 session. We haven't analyzed that data yet. That's a 12 session, and it's really to provide space for that. And, you know, maybe controversial, some programs will not serve families who are actively using. And we've never said no, because the baby is still in that household. And if the parent can get a handle on even seeing the need, that's good, that's progress. Or if the parent can, sometimes what we hear, like anecdotal stories, there was actually an NPR story on a mom in PCAP that got PFR. Anecdotally, it seemed that they can change their trauma past and really be the parent and show up for the child the way they wish their parent had showed up for them, is actually motivating. Oh my gosh, yeah. So we do have a research study. It's not funded, it's in writing. We're trying to find community partners in California to do this in SUD clinics and study it. And it would be combined with SUD treatment, but we're not changing PFR. So
I just want to thank you as well. This is so inspiring. I work at the Child Study Treatment Center in Tacoma, so we get kids in the red zone on both ends of that spectrum when they're older, so when they're 6 and above up to 18. And I'm wondering, you know, how these principles can be used for those kind of middle-aged kids using these principles. I know that mentalization-based therapy builds on this for older adolescents and adults to relearn this skill, reflective function. But how old is too old to kind of apply these interventions for school-age kids?
No, every age. I learned PFR and I'm still using it with my college-age kids and myself. But what I would say is there is a book that talks about the red zones and treatment that I think is the most golden book ever. You should get it. I would buy it for everybody in here. It's so good. It's that good. And it's by Clark Baim. And he does do trainings. I would say he's in the UK or Australia. He is amazing. Actually, you know, we could bring Clark. I would love to do this, right? Bring Clark and maybe partner with psychiatry. So the book is called Attachment-Based Practice with Adults, and then he has an attachment-based practice with children, and it's so good. And there's clinical case studies in there, and I would highly recommend like getting a group of colleagues to kind of think through those strategies and even consulting with him. I would love, you know, if people are interested, I think I would love to bring him. At the Barnard Center, we bring trainings all the time. I think that would be a real benefit. So anyways, email me and I will give you the name, but it's Clark Baim, B-A-I-M. It's so good.
It is attachment-based practice with adults.
Yes.
And then I think,
and then there's one for attachment-based practice with kids, and there's lots of case studies and how to apply these strategies. Not PFR, but how to deal with the red zones. Yeah.
Hi, we have another question from the chat. Have the studies of PFR been limited to ABC attachment profiles, or has D also been included? Is there anything different from an outcome standpoint for D?
No, so I didn't talk about D, but D is really those red zones, right? We don't exclude anybody from our trials. So we, when we recruit, like in child welfare, if the parent says yes, great. So all children across that range, A, B, C, and D, or the red zones, are going to be included in the study. We are field-based research, and so we once tried to measure attachment. And if you're working with lower income, highly stressed families, getting them to a lab at a university in Seattle isn't ever going to work, which we've learned. So we measure sensitivity. We don't measure attachment. But there are programs out there that have measured attachment, and those programs show shifts in that relationship from an attachment measure. We just don't do that.
Thanks so much for this. I was actually dropping off my toddler who just started daycare during the first half of this, so I felt like I was getting some live coaching.
Yeah.
I work mostly with suicidal adolescents and their parents. This is more of a reflection maybe than a question, but we have a model where we have a clinician who works with the parent and a clinician who works with the youth. And I was definitely very struck by some of the similarities in what you were talking about and what we've learned from including the parents more, specifically around getting really concrete. And that serve and return really feels so similar to the validation skill that we use a lot. And oftentimes families maybe who had mastered these skills earlier in their lives, or for whom it feels more comfortable and easy to do it with a younger child, are really struggling with it in times of stress, like a suicidal crisis, or because adolescents just respond in a less reinforcing way than younger kids.
Right.
So I don't know if you have any reflections on that, but just wanted to note the similarities and really interested in the attachment resource you're talking about. We've also been thinking about attachment-based family therapy as a model that's showing some efficacy in caring for suicidal youth. So really excited to learn more.
I think Clark's manual would be a really good resource because there's different dynamics going on the red zones for an A who might be suicidal and a C who might be suicidal. And boy, that's really hard to disentangle. So you guys are really making it seem like I need to bring Clark here online. Sorry, I'm not going to fly him out. It's too much. But if you guys can get me an audience of like 20 or 30, it'll blow your mind. He is a clinician. His work first started with sex predators, and his deep understanding of the attachment system and uncoupling some of those dynamics, those procedural memories, is really, really great. So again, if I do, I'll connect with Alyssa and she can share with you guys. But that manual would be helpful, yeah.
Can I also, if I may, do we need the... If I may, can I also put a plug in? I'm going to be doing a mentalization-based therapy teaching session on the 12th of November on the Tuesday faculty development seminar, which I think covers some of this for older adolescents.
Yeah, great.
I have one question in the chat, and I see Dr. Varley has his hand up online. Dr. Varley, are you trying to speak?
Yeah, thank you. What a fun presentation. I just appreciated it so much.
Thanks.
My question follows an earlier one to you, and it sounds like, from if I've gotten the message accurately, you take on all comers. That's kind of what I heard from what you said, and I'm just struck with the variety of circumstances that parents find themselves in. Thinking specifically, for example, about a parent who's been separated from their child, and child's in foster care, and that parent is working their way back to gaining custody. And then I was thinking about the substance use question, which you also commented on. And then just more broadly about people who just don't have their act together, are overwhelmed by anxiety or psychosis or PTSD themselves. And so I guess my question is twofold. Do you really not have some sort of, apart from the parents saying, yes, I'll try this, there's no other threshold screen that goes on? And then if there isn't, I mean, obviously you guys are making accommodations based upon the skill set and the emotional state of the parent, but I'm wondering if you can elaborate on your program's thinking about that.
Those are great questions. So no, there's no screen. We take anybody who wants to be in the research is eligible. And I think in a way, because what we're leveraging is human connection, and it's very personalized. And absolutely, we start where the parent is. So like the Australian mom, where she was at. If the parent, they could be really, you have a dyad that's super disconnected, you start with just sort of the observation and the baby cues and kind of figuring out, oh, my child is communicating to me. So there's no screening other than, for our studies, the age of the child is our requirement, and that the parent wants to participate. But it's so personalized. We can do a videotape and the dyad has this beautiful synchrony, right? And lovely interaction. And it's sort of like, well, then that's where we start and we just build on that. But more often than not, we're starting with parents and children who have a bit of a struggle, who aren't connecting like the Australian mom, who don't have that serve and return. And that's why, like, there's no screening in the sense that this is a skill we all need. It's just human connection. And so anybody could benefit from at least being a better observer, of their child's communication cues.
Thank you so much. Do we have time for one more question from the chat that's been waiting for a while? Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Could you please share any data on how these interventions seem to work across racial and ethnic groups? And could you speak to any cultural modifications that have seemed important to date?
So for the tribes, we did modifications more about the presentation, and the providers were spending more time in the home, so it wasn't a 1 hour session because that would be culturally not indicated. It's more like a 1.5 hour session because you need that time to connect and really join with the parent. We did in the Spanish speaking, the only thing is we translated the work handouts into Spanish, and for the infants, we developed infant handouts, which are available. And the providers in the Spanish speaking were Spanish speaking providers, so they received it in their home language. As far as race and ethnicity, all of our samples are really quite diverse. Probably 50% white. I am sorry, I don't have the statistic on top of my head, but in the child welfare, it's probably 50% white, and then BIPOC would be the other 50%, or Latin, some crossing of that. And then the Spanish-speaking half of the samples are usually around 250. About 43% were Spanish-speaking Latin families. In the tribes, they were all the children had to be Native American. So the provider or the parent could have been non-Native. But most of the parents are grandparents. And that was an adaptation. It was sort of whoever is the primary caregiver of the family were Native American. So I think that's about it. All of our samples super low income, like sadly low income, between $12,000 and $19,000 a year in these samples, and low education, low high school graduation rate.
Which really reflects the stress and the influence of stress on being high risk.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, for the good that you're doing in the world, for the prevention you're doing for kids, mental health so that they don't need to see us later.
Right.
That is great. And also for the crosstalk about like, how do we think about the principles you're using and adapt them to our setting?
Yeah.
So thank you for all of that. And
Thank
very
you.
much
Thank you for
appreciate it.
having me. And, email me if you want to pursue more. Clark Bain being one of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do want to just remind that there's a reception on Ocean 7 that people can go to, and people who are faculty, if they would stay for 30 minutes. But you and I will go over to the reception, and I think I see that there was someone who had a question that didn't get asked, so maybe we can talk to them outside the room.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Thanks. See you guys.
Thanks, everyone.